I invite you to take a moment and see each other and bring yourself into this communal space. Feel free to smile and wave. Next, we are going to light the chalice. The chalice is a symbol of Unitarian Universalism that is used throughout the world. If you have a chalice with you, feel free to light it at the same time. Jordan will copy and paste the chalice lighting words into the chat so that you can say those along with us. I'm running out of hands. Could you focus?
Just grow some more.
All right. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, the light of wisdom, and the energy of action. Experiencing technical difficulties? Oh, it's still lit. Good. All right. Next we will have, next we will have a responsive reading. Then we will sing a song, then we'll have the children's stories, and then we will do joys and sorrows. So our responsive reading is 637, and this time we're trying to do a screen share so that you can all see on the screen the reading that we are doing together. So I will read the regular text if you would like to read the italics. And it is number 637. You should see it on your screen now. A litany of atonement. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that we have struck out in anger without just cause.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For the selfishness which sets us apart and alone.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For losing sight of our unity.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
Thank you. All right, next we are going to sing Be Ye Lamps Unto Yourselves, and we are going to also share that on the screen share. In just a moment, you should be able to see the music. And then I will turn it over to Lindy.
So let's go through it 3 times, I think. It's probably a good idea to mute yourself. I am trying to experiment with holding notes. If some people hold notes while other people sing, then it doesn't matter if it doesn't sync up right. But I haven't had a breakthrough on how that works yet. So we're just gonna mute for now. And I really miss your voices. We'll just do what we have to do. Be ye lamps unto yourselves, be on confidence, hold to the truth within yourselves, as to the only
Thank you, Lindy. Next, we are going to have a children's story read by Leslie Black. Next, we will say together the meditation for joys and sorrows. Jordan will paste that in the chat. We gather in this community, sometimes in fear, sometimes in trust, sometimes in joy, but always in hope that we can support and strengthen one another in our common quest for healing and wholeness. So now is the time where we can share our joys and concerns with each other. All right, next we are going to have a reading number 565, and Jordan will do the screen share for that. It's split, so you have to go down to the bottom of the first half and then to the top of the second. It's called Prophets. So once again, I will read the regular text if you will read the italics. Always it is easier to pay homage to prophets than to heed the direction of their vision.
It is easier blindly to venerate the saints than to learn the human quality of their sainthood.
It is easier to glorify the heroes of the race than
to give weight to their examples.
To worship the wise is much easier than to profit by their wisdom.
Great leaders are honored not by adulation, but by sharing their insights and values.
Grandchildren of those who stoned the prophet sometimes gather up the stones to build the prophet's monument.
Always it is easier to pay homage to prophets than to heed the direction of their vision.
And now we have a chance to listen to Lorien Belton. So I will turn the time over to her.
So my house heat just went on and I just tried to turn it off. So hopefully is it causing white noise interference for anyone but me? Okay, hopefully it goes off soon so I'm not distracted too. Okay, so I've been trying to figure out how I can read the thing I wrote while making it still look like I'm making eye contact with the little dot right there. We'll see. Okay. So I picked the topic of responsibility because I've been feeling like I have a lot of them lately. So these past 2 months of staying at home even more than I normally do, I've made a couple of observations. Among them, I have just as many responsibilities as I did before. Being home doesn't change that at all, shockingly. But on some level, because I'm not bouncing here and there, I have more time to think. As a result, I've spent some time thinking about my responsibilities, why I have so many, what it means to have them, what they are in the first place, and how I feel about them. In particular, it's on my mind because so many of them are of my own making. And that, coupled with the nagging feeling that I have too many of them, lends itself to this somewhat awkward corollary that perhaps I'm not going about committing to responsibilities very, shall we say, responsibly. I'm not sure I've answered that question for myself yet, but that's sort of where the thought started. So because one of my responsibilities is doing human resources, i.e. payroll and sort of things for CVUU, one of the ways I've been thinking about it is that our federal government has a term for people who get paid to come up with their own responsibilities. It's called exempt, which really just means exempt from getting paid overtime because it's your own fault you came up with those things to do in the first place. There's more to it than that too, but that's kind of the essence, right? I'm exempt, woohoo. I can load whatever I want onto myself. And I find I do, paid or unpaid, in fact. This led me down a path, at any rate, of trying to figure out sort of how many of my responsibilities are in fact of my own making, and how I feel about them, and how I feel about the fact that I've made them. So, as is my wont, I came up with some categories. I've found that that's what I do in life. There are formal responsibilities that I have, where I'm actually in some sort of legal contract to do something. The two that come to mind are my mortgages and my marriage. Different, to be sure, but still on some level enforceable by an outside party. I chose those, but on another level, I kind of had to choose them because they are the current social way. They're a means to an end. Owning a house. If I want to own a house, unless I have a lot more cash than I actually do, I've got a mortgage, right? I could be in a loving partnership without marriage, but if we want health insurance and the financial protections for the person I love, there we go. There's that responsibility that we contract into. So I picked those, and I have to say, by and large, really quite okay with them. There are a lot of responsibilities too that I have accepted. For example, paying the bills and filling out forms for CVUU and CRIC. I do those on behalf of others. In this particular case, you folks, right? I value the community that we are, and it's worth it for me to fill out forms if that helps us have community. And on some level, I admit, I find it oddly satisfying to write checks. I'm a little saddened at all of the online things I have moved to because I kind of like writing physical checks, but it's just easier not to these days. If I were confident that someone else was going to get all of these things done, I'd be more than happy to hand it off. But I really benefit from the experience, from having those responsibilities. It's nice to feel needed. It's good to feel useful. And I choose to keep these responsibilities and, frankly, often to expand them one little piece at a time, in part for good reasons and partially because it seems a lot easier to just do them than deal with either the results of leaving them behind or the challenge of handing them off. Is that freely chosen responsibility? I don't know. It's complicated. There's another category that sort of cascades from the others, the mortgages and the marriages, the other commitments. I'm calling it maintenance responsibilities. For example, I am responsible for my dog's well-being, generally. But that means that this week I am responsible for how long her toenails are. It makes her feet sore when she walks. And so no one's holding me to it. Aw, thank you for the random Leslie dog picture. That was extremely, extremely timely. Love it. My dog is outside enjoying the air. So no one's holding me to it, but it's clearly the ethical thing to do to add a responsibility to my day to make sure that gets done. I chose the dog. I choose ethics. Therefore, that responsibility is also on me. I picked that one. A step down from that, all those things that I feel like I have to do that no one else would maybe even notice if I didn't. Some are really silly, trite things, you know, putting the salt and pepper back where I think they go. But plenty of them are, I think, actually a fundamental type of self-care, like cleaning the house so I feel good about my living space. No one else really cares that much, but I do, and I'm more functional when my house is clean. So in some regard, that responsibility is a responsibility to myself. Making sure that snack options are strategically placed when an exhausted husband comes home so he can get food in him before we have to talk about food. I choose those kinds of responsibilities in part because I've given them to myself, but in part for my own sense of mental well-being and sense of control. But all the same, I suspect I could probably back off and it wouldn't hurt too much. A la Becca at the moment, there is obviously crud that life throws at you, responsibilities that no one asked for. We all know where those lie, unchosen, and often unwanted, and at least hopefully with some kind of silver lining. Those are sort of my thoughts on my personal responsibilities. But then there are this whole other category of social responsibilities that no one often enforces. We either just do or do not feel called to follow them. We tend to call them norms, not responsibilities. But they've been getting a lot of press lately, generally under the heading of wearing masks. Wearing a mask in public is primarily about being socially responsible rather than about individual protection. I wear a mask because it's my responsibility as a contributing member of society to do my part in this crazy world of pandemic. I also pick up random plastic trash out of the gutter because it's my responsibility as a contributing member of society. No one's gonna get after me if I take a walk with my dog and I don't pick up the little, candy wrapper out of the gutter. It's my choice to do it. I don't necessarily see any personal benefit. I'm not the fish that didn't eat the plastic straw wrapper because it never made it to the river. But one of the things I feel like about these recent days of pandemic and staying at home and what have you, is that it feels like there are a lot of these kinds of responsibilities to think about. What's most relevant, I think, is that we have a lot of new responsibilities, new ones. We've always had plenty of responsibilities to our fellow Earth travelers. We're supposed to not waste water. We're supposed to watch the children around us for signs that they need help. We're supposed to support friends in need when tragedy strikes. But usually they don't come quite so fast and furious, and they're usually at least in a category of things we've experienced before, so we have a box in our heads for how to think about them. But these days I feel like there's a whole realm of new social responsibilities that certainly for lots of people it's easy to resist and fear because we don't already know how to handle them. I suspect that I am hardly unique in that when I am personally stressed, it often has to do with how many responsibilities I have of all of these different kinds, compared to how much time I have to fit them all into my life. But the fact is, having thought about them, is that I chose almost all of them, really. I want these responsibilities for various reasons. And secondly, most of them are always there, even when I'm not stressed. So why sometimes do responsibilities feel like a huge, overwhelming burden? And sometimes they're just those things that I do throughout my day. Particularly when you chose all of them on purpose. It sort of feels like, well, gosh, if I chose them, I should be okay with them. But so here's my theory, as I've been thinking about this topic over the last week or so, trying to figure out what I was going to say. I think my greatest stresses come from responsibilities that I feel like, or I've forgotten, I feel like that I can't share. A burden alone just feels heavier. And really what's fluctuating is my idea or my concept of whether or not I have someone to share that responsibility with, whether the world is sharing that responsibility with me or not. So I think it's true of most of the things that I outlined before, whether chosen or sprung upon you. A mortgage? better when shared. Cash, refugee, and immigrant connection, finances, and human resources, definitely better if I have a chance to reach out to someone else to help make a decision. House cleaning, even if I'm actually the only one who cares, definitely better shared. And all that, what? Mask wearing, by definition, better shared. Sharing responsibilities is how we grow. We help children learn to do the dishes. We teach them how to feed and brush that puppy that they begged so long for. It makes them better adults when we share responsibility with them. I've had a few learning moments on this front myself lately, or perhaps more accurately, because I do know it feels better to share responsibilities. We could call them reminder moments rather than learning moments. Early last week, I called George for some help moving things out of Crick's office in advance of some impending construction chaos, which is to say sheetrock dust. We hefted boxes and folding tables and an extremely large beanbag. And at the end, I thanked him. And then he thanked me because I'd asked for help and given him a chance to share a responsibility that had been a burden for me. And at the moment, I probably didn't share that with him, but what an extraordinary thing to be thanked for asking for help. Then just yesterday, I had a wonderful talk with Ethan. I got his excellent advice on something I had been trying to shoulder on my own. And I hadn't even really been thinking about it that way for some reason. But in addition to the specific advice he gave me on the specific thing we were talking about, he reminded me quite directly that it's okay to reach out. And I'm so grateful for that because I'd actually sort of forgotten since, Monday when George had to remind me. So here's a reminder, since apparently it's handy to have one. Take your responsibilities and ask for help with something. Not necessarily even because you're at your wit's end. Those requests I find are sometimes less well received, particularly on the house cleaning front. Not because you can't do it yourself, if you just tried a little harder, but because you can do it yourself, but it's better to share it. What? Ask for help when you are capable without help? Yes, actually, yes. Even when you're not in desperate need? Yes. In fact, specifically when you aren't, because it's really good practice for when you are. I hope that as both George and Ethan did for me, this gives you a little hope or structure or whatever to think about how you can balance your life in these stressful times, find that balance by asking for help, by sharing your responsibilities. You know that Chief Seattle quote about whatever you do to the web of life, we do to ourselves? I've always thought about that in the negative. Don't hurt the web or you too will hurt, which is part of it, certainly. But it's not just that. It's also about strengthening it. If you reach out and share a responsibility, you give someone else a chance to help you and to feel good about it. Even if it's just finding someone else to help you clip the dog's toenails, which I would recommend. You make a connection stronger, a link in that web, more sturdy and able to carry a burden or withstand a storm. So those are my thoughts that came of my thinking that I had too many responsibilities and I wasn't perhaps being responsible about that the way to be responsible about your responsibilities is to share them. So Thank you, as always, for the chance to share with you. I will turn it back over to Joe.
Thank you so much, Lorien. That was very insightful. Next, we will sing a song, The Fire of Commitment, and Jordan will put that up on the screen share. It might be a little small if we do the whole thing at once, so Jordan will try and just keep up with the scrolling. But we'll turn it over to you, Lindy.
All right. Short intro. From the light of days remembered, burns a beacon, guiding clear, guiding hands, hearts and spirits into days that they were here. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way. When we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, and our promise finds fulfillment, and our future can begin. From the stories of our living means a song of brave and free, calling pilgrims still to worship in the light of liberty. When the fire of commitment, mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way. When we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment, and our future can begin. When the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way. When we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment, and our future can begin. That's the resolution chord.
Thank you, Lindy. Thank you always for the music. It really adds a lot. Next, we will be extinguishing the chalice, and Jordan will paste the chalice extinguishing words in the chat. So if you'd like to say these together with us. We extinguish this flame,
but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of courage and commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
And now we have time to visit together, get a snack if you'd like to. Thank you for everyone who participated today. I really appreciate all of your contributions.